Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast, a podcast featuring interviews with equestrian authors who love all things horses and writing about them. In each episode, you'll hear inspirational stories from horsebook authors, including writing advice and marketing tips to help you write your very own horsebook. If you're an author, aspire to be an author, or simply love horsebooks, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Kade, and creative writing makes my spurs jingle. And welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight. Today I am so excited to have author Candace Carrabus on the show with us. Hi, Candace.
Good morning, afternoon, depending on where you are.
Great to have you on the show. So just to give people a little bit of background about you, I'm going to read your author bio, and then we can get into the fun part, which is the interview questions.
Okay.
All right. Carrabus writes from the Lincoln County, Missouri farm she shares with her husband and daughter. A scoliosis diagnosis at age 11 changed her life. A horse lover from a young age, she signed up for riding lessons and learned much more than posting trot. With quiet power, horses provided comfort and a sympathetic ear, never judging or poking fun at her cumbersome back brace. Those years, though often difficult, taught Candace the value of persistence, the healing power of believing in oneself, and how strength can be gained through kindness. Her stories are imbued with the irresistible wonder, mystery, and solace her equine friends have provided. Wow, Candace, that's a lovely bio. So it sounds like at a young age you had some health issues that horses helped you heal and work through. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, it was before, all kinds of equine therapy that are out there now and doing amazing things with, obviously, therapeutic riding and PTSD. It's just remarkable that science, I guess, is catching up with those of us who have been horse lovers our whole life, what we have always known about what it's like to be around horses.
Yes.
So yeah, it was kind of a lonely place sometimes. The brace, it's different now, but back then it was a big ugly thing that couldn't be hidden, and kids being kids, they can make it a little hard, and but it was always good at the barn.
Absolutely, and that must have been a difficult thing as a young woman to have to manage. You're already, trying to figure out who you are in the world, and at a young age feeling kind of awkward.
Years and middle school and all of that are hard enough. Absolutely.
And then add that on, and it's like I totally understand how horses can help you work through, particularly as a young woman, some of those difficult emotions and things that you're dealing with. My horse was my solace when my parents were going through a divorce, so that was my happy place. The barn and the horses. Obviously, that is sort of how you got into horses. Is that kind of your starting point with horses? Was
during that time that I got my first horse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about your furry friends. Maybe your first horse.
My first horse was a thoroughbred mare off the track. This was back on Long Island, and that was a pretty common beast to find pretty easily because there's, thoroughbred racing in New York. And she had been bought by the place where I was taking lessons. And then I started taking lessons on her. So I knew her before my parents bought her for me and had her delivered to the house Christmas morning. That was so magical. She was wearing a green blanket trimmed with red. I can't imagine how, this is way pre-internet, like where my mother had to go to find that blanket, but somehow she did. And she was a dark gray. It looked, really good on her.
Christmas for the records. Like, I can't, how do you top that, right?
You can't top that. That's exactly right.
You're still involved with horses. You started as a young girl, and now you have a whole bunch of furry friends in addition to your horses.
The horse I have now, a Trakehner thoroughbred quarter horse cross. Don't know where any of the thoroughbred went because he's kind of a big bodied guy. I do have 2 goats, a llama, an alpaca, and 2 miniature donkeys at home. So
a llama.
Yes.
How did a llama come into your life?
It started with the goats. It started as an FFA project for my daughter. And then the goats needed a herd guardian, and llamas are used as herd guardians because they're naturally aggressive toward canines. And we do have some predation from coyotes here. So to put my mind at ease as much as anything else, we looked around for a llama, and this llama was looking for a new home, and he happened to come with an alpaca. So we got two, and they're great. They're great. They all have to be sheared. That's a bit of a chore.
Do you make yourself sweaters out of their
Not
their fur?
quite there. I'm not really a knitter or a crocheter, but I have been experimenting with felting the fleece. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting art form. You can do a lot with it. So
felting. What?
felting,
Explain
making
what
felt
Yeah.
out of the fleece.
So you could make like holiday stockings, right? With the felting.
Sure. Yeah, you can make a lot of different things. Yeah.
Wow, that's neat.
Yeah.
I can only imagine a whole nother topic of, crafting, like
That's right.
Candace makes felt, like the whole behind the scenes documentary.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
So you also, you have been involved with horses for a very long time. You're still involved with horses. You have a pretty interesting story about an island. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of those?
Yeah, when I was about 21, a friend of mine had the contract to run a public riding stable in a county park, and he decided to get out of that. I had worked there for him and managed it for him for a while anyway, and so there were a couple of years left on the contract. And so it was a little bit at loose ends anyway, and I called a friend who also had a horse, and I was like, hey, let's buy this business. So we did, and we did it for a couple of years, and it was pretty crazy. Renting horses to the public, it's a whole nother world.
I'm sure. And this was in Long Island,
at the East End in the Hamptons.
In the Hamptons, which the Hamptons is legendary for its attraction of the rich and the famous coming out for weekend getaways from New York City. Hunted with.
Oh yeah, that was really cool. Actually, that first horse I had, I used to field hunt her with the Smithtown Hunt, and that was when Harry Dallaire of Snowman fame was the huntsman of the Smithtown Hunt. And so, if I have a claim to fame, I suppose that's it. Sort of rubbed elbows with him occasionally.
That's great. So you rode with Harry. I mean, you can say that. So
yeah. And he liked to keep a very steady, fast pace. So you had to learn how to, fox hunting is crazy. You never know what's going to literally cross your path, and to be pretty much ready for anything and jumps at a gallop. Basically, it's wild.
Good grief.
It's exhilarating and amazing. Yeah.
I'm more of like a slow paced, Western pleasure kind of girl. Like, jumping hedges is the one time I jumped with my childhood horse was in a 4-H fair. I was doing hunter hack, and they put hay bales underneath the cross poles. I went right over her head because she put her head down to eat the hay, and I went flying over the top. Yeah, that was my brief history with jumping.
And you said, that's enough of that.
I was like, well, I think my mom kind of said that's enough of that. She was panicked, and I was also like, I'll just go slow. That's funny. So, Candace, you have written quite a few books, and what I love about talking with you is that you write for the adult. You write fiction for the adult horse lover, which is great because there's a lot of YA books for horse lovers, but you and I both write for adults. Would you talk a little bit about your books and tell us a little bit about about your series and why you chose to write for adults?
My first book is, sorry to turn away there for a second, but this is Raiveer. It's the Horse Caller Book 1, and it's a fantasy. I just thought, I still like to have adventures. I can't be the only grown woman who still likes to have adventures. It's not just for the young. So the main character in that is actually almost 50 years old.
That's great. And Raiveer has horses in it as well?
Oh, yes. The main character is a woman of this world who is taken with a horse through a portal to another world. But they believe her to be their horse caller, who can find and return the lost horses and return them to greatness. A large part of the story, of course, is kind of what I mentioned in my bio about coming to believe in yourself and the power of that.
You just had knee surgery and your conversation about the book that you just held up, really in talking about how you have to find the power in yourself to, you know, to heal and live in this world. You've kind of experienced some of that with your own knee surgery, which has given you a lot of time to catch up on reading your horse books, right?
Yes.
But you were just sharing with me before we launched into the interview about how you really took care of yourself prior to your surgery and are actually having a really wonderful recovery. And I think you're edging towards getting back in the saddle. Can you talk a little bit, because I think this is really powerful, about how you took on your own healing to get through this surgery.
It's important to continue moving forward, no matter what, if you can. And even after injuring it, which was a horse-related accident, and healing from that, and doing all the physical therapy for that, you know, I refused to let it slow me down to the extent possible. I had a brace I could wear, you know, when I walked if I needed to, and would just do yoga and stretch and stay as strong as I could. And as soon as I decided, yes, this was the time finally to get the knee replaced, I really worked even harder to, you know, simple things like drink plenty of water, which I usually do anyway, but, and be as stretched and in as good a shape as I could be going into the surgery. And I think it's making a big difference in the speed of my recovery.
That's wonderful. So taking care of your health is so very important, and, you know, ownership of healing in your own physical well-being and mind, body, and soul is
There's a lot more we can do, I think, than we realize for ourselves. And I basically just take the mindset that I can do and accomplish anything that I put my mind to. And I truly believe that. And so I believed that I was going to recover from the surgery quickly, and so far so good.
Wonderful. Well, you know, I said a little prayer for you when you were going into your surgery. I knew that was coming, and I'm so glad to hear that your recovery is going well. And thank you for being here on the show today, because, you know, the surgery just happened not that long ago. So
got my leg propped up. It's so good. Well, you can't see that part, but
I know that's perfect. Speaking of being able to do anything that you set your mind to, I wanted to talk about book 3 of your Dream Horse Mystery Series. It just won the top award for equine novel at the American Horse Publications Equine Media Awards.
wow.
I you know, that's wonderful and such a prestigious award. Can you tell us a little bit about how winning that award made you feel? And hold up that book cover again, which I'll also link to in the show notes so people can see it.
Yep. This is Wrong Lead, which is book 3 in the Dream Horse Mystery Series. And I found out about the American Horse Publications, I think, because of you.
Oh, wow.
I think so, because I was researching, I know we'll talk about the box set more later, but I was researching this idea of putting together a box set of other adult equine authors, and I came across you and your book. I had never heard of it, and I thought, wow, what a great organization. I didn't even know it was out there. Saw they had a contest, found this out about 3 days before the deadline to enter the contest, but this book was published in 2018, so it fit the criteria for entry, and I joined, and I sent the book in and went to the conference, which was a fabulous, fabulous experience in so many ways. It's hard to even, I think I would have been happy if I hadn't won, but of course that was just icing on the cake. But to be recognized by a group of equine, mostly authors and photographers, it was big.
Oh, and congratulations. I mean, that's such an honor. I had such a great time spending time with you at the American Horse Publications. I think
that's so fun.
That's the beauty of it too. You get to meet these people that you have, basically online relationships with, and you're able to get together and talk. And we had a great equine author meetup where we discussed, what's working for people and tossed around ideas. And it's a great organization. And I'm so glad that you're a part of it. And I'm so happy that you won this prestigious award. I love the little sticker that you had on the front of the book. Did they send that to you, or did you have that made?
No, I had it made.
It's perfect. I love it. And I think listeners would be interested in knowing a little bit more about the Dream Horse mystery series. Can you kind of give us a log line or a brief summary of what that series is about? I know there's whipped cream involved.
Yeah, that's right, there is. Well, it's about a down on her luck jumper rider whose parents abandoned her when she was a baby, or so she's been told. And she has a lot of anger issues because of that. And she uses the whipped cream straight from the can to sort of manage her stress and so on. She's just a really fun character. Her name is Viola Parker. And she finds out that her parents actually set up a trust fund for her. But to get it, she has to keep a job for 1 full year by the time she's 30. So she's gone from job to job because she's got strong opinions about horses and how they should be ridden and treated. And that puts her in conflict. She rides for others, their horses and, jumpers, and they want winners. And, not every horse is ready always to do what the owners want them to do. And that put her in conflict with them. So she often lost jobs or quit. So she ends up in Missouri on a horse farm with a job that she has to keep for 1 year. And within a couple of days of her arriving, a dead body shows up. So it becomes a whole nother thing, to try to keep this job and stay alive and solve the murder. And there's a horse that she used to ride who died actually while she was riding him. His name is Wastrel, and he is the dream horse. And he starts coming to her in her dreams and bringing her very cryptic clues. She doesn't even understand that they're clues in the beginning. But even so, it's very hard to decipher what his meaning is. But somehow it all comes together to help her solve the mysteries and learn more about herself and become a better and stronger person and heal some of her history throughout, the course of the whole 3 books in the series. So this is a very satisfying series to write.
So is it complete, or do you have?
Yeah. It is complete. It is complete in the 3 books. But people ask me all the time, when is there going to be another Dream Horse mystery? Raiveer, the first book I showed, starts a series that I'd like to finish. I have another book that actually is a YA that starts a series that I'd like to finish. So I kind of would like to finish some of the other things I've started before I go back to it. Mm-hmm. But chances are I will write more Dream Horse mysteries in the future, because I just, what it's like after you write characters in several books, you really kind of fall in love with them, all of them.
Absolutely.
And they're still in your head.
They won't leave you
talking to you like, hey, I've got more to say, there's more to my story or whatever. And it's hard to ignore that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the very best parts of being an author is that, yes, like, I feel like I kind of have sometimes this out of body experience when I'm writing my books. It's like the characters are telling me what to say. It's like, I'm not even there. It's like, I feel like I'm just flowing out and it's coming out of me from, I don't even know where. Do you have that experience too?
I absolutely have that experience. And I'm so glad to hear I'm not the only one. I mean, I have talked to other authors about this, but I tell people who aren't authors all the time, and they give me the look, that looks like you're crazy. Because I'll say, I started this scene or this chapter with an idea of where it was going to go, and the characters just took it someplace else. They had their own idea of how this conversation was going to go, what was really at stake. They reveal things in dialogue or sometimes inner dialogue that I didn't even know about them. Mm-hmm. I'm like, where did that come from? So yeah, it does feel like an out-of-body experience. That's a great way to describe it.
It is. And, I believe that's like, you talked about believing in energy and good energy, and that, mm-hmm. the universe kind of provides. I feel like Stephen Pressfield is an author who also writes about being an author. And he says it's the muse. When you have those experiences, it's the muse speaking through you. It's not actually you. So it's a really fun experience. So Candace, how many books have you written? So I've heard you speak of several, but like how many books have you given? How many book babies do you have?
I have 5 novels, and I also have 2 novellas that are only available as ebook right now until I finish that series.
Mhm.
I'll collect them into and make them available as a paperback also.
That's great. And
And those novellas, the Witting Women novellas, they touch even more on this mystical sort of the things that we don't understand that sometimes happen, the connection between us and the universe or whatever that energy is that's out there. Yeah, they're really fun to write too.
that's great. So what, this is such a fascinating conversation. So what excites you about writing kind of about the universe and that mystical mystery space, and then how do horses play into that, because they're very prominent in your books too? So like, what excites you about writing in that realm?
It just sort of comes naturally to me, I think, because I have a huge curiosity about that. And I've had my own, I think we've all had experiences of sort of supernatural. We don't always realize that's what it is, those strange coincidences that happen sometimes and so on, and that we write off to coincidence, and seem kind of strange, and then we just go on with our lives. But I stop and pause, and I'm like, wait a second, what
Mm-hmm.
just happened here? And my brain goes into writer mode, and it's like, well, what if this, and before I know it, another new story and characters are blooming in my brain. So I just love that. I love exploring that huge unknown
Mm-hmm.
that's out there, that I think we can connect with. Um, and maybe it's through dreams, like in the Dream Horse mysteries. And sometimes it's through our connection with animals. I feel that very strongly, that they have a connection with us, more spiritual side of life, maybe that we've sort of lost, and they haven't lost it because they haven't built a huge society that sort of beats it out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they live in that moment all the time. And I think that the more time we spend with them, the better chance we have of sort of strengthening that connection for ourselves.
I love that. That is so beautiful, and I think so true. I think being around animals and horses, it really slows me down,
Yes.
and gives me an opportunity to like look around and be like, oh wow, it's really beautiful here, and this horse is beautiful, and just slow down, Mon. Right? It's
Yeah.
like when I was in Jamaica. This is a kind of a strange story, but I was in Jamaica with my husband, and we were getting married, and we had just gotten there, and I was like all like wound up, and I was trying to deal with this lawn chair, and it was like not folding out, and it was getting stuck on these rocks, and I was like all flustered, and this man walked by, and he goes, "Slow down, man," and it's like,
Oh,
roll with it, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's like we create so much anxiety for ourselves, and
yes.
being around the animals, the horses in particular, really helps me slow down, because I can get like going really fast, and
Hmm.
you were just speaking to that, so that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
uh, so you're obviously a writer, and you've got a lot of like cool things running around in your head. You've got starts to series, you've got a very successful series in the Dream Horse mystery series, so you're up to a lot of things. So what are you curious about right now? I've heard a little rumor, a little whisper that you might be curious about something. Would you talk to us a little bit about what that is?
Are you hinting at the box set I mentioned
I am.
earlier?
I am.
Yeah, I would really like to put together a box set of the first books in series of all different authors of equine adult fiction.
Mhm.
And I just think there's a huge opportunity there for cross promotion, and for readers discovering, through an author they know, discovering all these other authors they didn't know. And that's good for everybody. It's good for the authors involved, and it's really good for the readers.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what I loved about you when we connected at the American Horse Publications Conference, is that when I asked you in the interview questions that you responded back, what are you curious about? And you're curious about how authors, which I'm really stand behind, is like how authors can unite and support each other, and this box set is a testament to that. And what do you think are some other ways that authors can unite and support each other better. You know, I'm really interested in bringing a spotlight on horse books and lifting up the community and getting us all in a conversation where we're working together and supporting each other. Because like you just said, when you were talking about the box set, someone who loves my books will love your books, will love somebody else's books because they love horses. You know, we have that common thread. So would you talk a little bit about how you would like to see authors work together, or what you think are opportunities for authors to partner up to support each other?
Yeah, I think that I flagged you down at the conference, the American Horse Publications Conference, and we started talking. One of the first things I said was, hey, I really want to have a serious conversation with you about cross-promotional opportunities. And I think that's a huge piece that's missing. It can be hard to network and find like-minded authors, and it can be intimidating to approach other authors, but I really think there's a huge opportunity for authors to work together more and team up to, like you said, raise up the whole community, unite, support each other in many different ways. Yeah.
And this
not look at other authors as competition so much as we're on the same team. And
absolutely.
we're all working for the same goal. And that's to delight our readers. And we're all different. We could all start with the same prompt and we would all write a completely different story. So yes, what your readers will like my books and vice versa, but it doesn't mean they're the same at all. Yes, they have horses running through them as a common thread, and of course human relationships with each other as well as horses, but they are still each a unique story that can be enjoyed.
And, you know, and what's so interesting about this too is, you know, it's like, I love a good horse book, and I know, you know, like I'll binge read like a book. I'll read it in a day, and then I'll binge read the whole series, and I'll be like, oh, now what do I do? You know, so it's like,
That's right.
Right. So that sort of reader, or me as a reader, you know, I'm constantly looking for, you know, what's the next book I can jump into and read really fast and get through it, that, you know, has horses as a focal point, in addition to the lessons that you learn by following the leading characters. So so I think it's great to put a network out there so we can all, you know, share. And I think teaming up on box sets and newsletters and different promotional opportunities, I think is really going to unite this community. And I can't wait to dive a little deeper into that with you offline, and, you know, come up with some more ideas, which we're enjoying doing already. Yep. So have you been a part of a box set before? Like, how did that work? What did that look like? What was the outcome? Would you do it, you know, obviously do it again? It was successful enough that you're interested in doing it again. So would you talk more about what it's like being a part of a box set with other authors?
Yes, I was invited into a couple of box sets in the past, and it was such a positive experience. Not only the opportunity to meet these other authors and read their works, because, you know, one was called Must Love Pets, so all the books had a pet or animal of some kind as a very, you know, big part, it's like its own character or a big part of the story. And it was so successful that we actually put together a Must Love Pets 2 collection. They're usually put out for a limited time because nobody wants to tie up one of their books, you know, for too long as part of something like that. But, you know, everybody does their part to promote it and advertise it, and they can be very, very, very successful. I haven't put one together myself yet, but this one I'm talking about, I feel pretty confident that can be pulled together really successfully.
That's exciting. I mean, you know, a box set full of first in series around equestrian fiction for adults. It's like, woohoo! That like totally makes my, yeah, that makes my spurs jingle. So but I imagine there's legal agreements that go into being a part of a box set. How does that work? What does that look like? Can you
Sure. Everybody signs a contract, you know, as far as which title they're going to put in, and the contract states, you know, for how long, if there is an end date, that's stated, and then of course how the royalties will be collected and distributed. So typically one person, there are services that do this, but in my experience, the person who organizes it also uploads it to their account. All the authors are listed, of course, but then the royalties come into that person's account, and they're responsible for splitting them up monthly and distributing them via PayPal or whatever works. And also each author, usually there's a buy-in So each author throws in, could be $100 or more toward the book cover design, the interior layout, and any ads that could be bought and stacked around, particularly around release day, to really try to boost the initial sales and maybe get on some lists as part of that.
Very cool. And the kind of box set that you're talking about too is digital only or ebook.
Oh,
version only.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to be clear there, because there would be a whole lot more cost and effort that would go into having a physical.
Oh yeah. And I don't even know, they would be, I mean, once you pull in 8-10 books, that's too long. Certainly.
A monster.
Yeah. I don't even know how you would physically do that with print, but yeah.
Yeah. I think KDP print has a limit of 800 pages, and if it's longer than that, you can't do it physical.
Depending on which paper you choose, and yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even collecting my series into one volume, I had to play around with the layout and the fonts and so on to fit it within that limit.
Mm-hmm. And then so what were some of the other successes or positives that came out of being part of this box set? I mean, obviously you saw some royalties from being a part of this, but I imagine there is sort of a upstream of sales of your books or connections that you're making. Would you talk a little bit about
Sure.
that?
I mean, the books that I had in each of these collections were the first in a series, and so it definitely leads to people buying subsequent books in the series. And I've remained friends with all of the authors that I was in the series with. And so, for instance, one of them just invited me into, she's doing a Halloween sort of author crawl, for lack of a better word, where, they're putting together this giant list of authors that readers can go from one blog to the other, to the other, to the other. They're all connected. I guess it's going on Halloween because it's called the Halloween Spooktacular or something like that. But any
fun.
type of book is welcome. Yeah, and so I've been invited into newsletter swaps and all sorts of other opportunities that I never would have had I not networked with these authors as part of the box sets. So.
That's great. And then I imagine it also boosted your social media following and your newsletter signups as well.
Yep. All those things.
That's great. So it's just like an extra channel, an extra avenue. I mean, while you're part of these box set, you still leave your standalone books up in for sale. So you still have that channel. This is just like a secondary channel, another stream of income to
again, and any readers. If you were promoting the box set, your readers would see it and say, well, I've read In the Reins or whatever title you might have in it, but I really like Carly and her books, and so I'm sure I'll like all these other books, and they buy it and they read the other books, and again, that leads to purchases of all these other authors' titles as well. It's good for everybody.
Oh, I agree. And it's a great way to support each other and bring value to people that like to read about horses, so, and then networking, and promoting across everyone's channels and different strategies that they use for marketing really makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
That being said, do you have any particular advice on how authors can market their books? Is there any one thing that really works for you, or what is your recommendation?
Well, I've tried a lot of different things over the years. There's no question that building a newsletter email list is still a very powerful tool, because those are the people who are going to buy your books when you have a new one come out and so on. And you can build that through BookFunnel and Prolific Works, places like that. I have found them not to be ideal, although people will sign up. They often will also unsubscribe, like the next time they get the newsletter, they're just signing up to get the freebie or whatever. But you will gain readers that way. You just have to be prepared for the ones that come in and leave really quickly. I don't think Facebook parties are as big as they used to be, but some of my greatest fans I've definitely gained through participating in other authors' release parties and things like that. You pop in for an hour and you throw in a couple blurbs and you answer people's questions, just interact in general, you know, and you give away a copy of your book. And I've never been afraid to ship my print books overseas. Some authors don't like to do that. The shipping can be terrible, but a woman became a fan through one of these events. She won my book. I sent it to her. She lives in England. She started my street team for me.
Oh, that's lovely. So you have a street team in England. That's exciting.
It's on the internet. You know what I mean? Okay. It's on Facebook. So it's got people in it from England, from the Philippines, from the US, you know, from all over. This reader in the Philippines, it's hard for her to get her hands on print books. So she really, really appreciated it when I sent her my books. And she set up Facebook pages for all my books or all my series, you know, just completely unasked. She just enjoyed them and wanted to do what she could do. It's amazing how generous people are with their time. It's absolutely remarkable. But I feel like part of how that happens is that you get out there and you be personal and you actually talk to people. And I had a fan one time comment on my blog, and I emailed her back, or maybe she emailed me, I can't remember, it doesn't matter. And she was like astounded. She said, "You're the only author who has ever responded." That was my exact reaction.
I'm sorry, my jaw just dropped.
Yes, literally. I was like, what are people doing? I don't care how busy you are. If a fan takes the time to reach out to you personally to say how much they loved your book, you respond to that. Absolutely. And you write them back. You know?
We wouldn't be anything without our readers.
Exactly. So that was a really valuable lesson. I mean, it's how I would always respond anyway, but to have her tell me that, I was just really surprised and kind of saddened in a way to hear that. And I have no idea who else she might have reached out to who didn't respond. But you know, like I said, you have to be a real person.
Mm-hmm. That breaks my heart too, and that's what I really like about you so much is you're about authors supporting each other, but you really stand for, and I stand for this too, taking really good care of your readers, you know, and in doing that little extra bit, you know, I think it's so important because you know, the creative outlet is for us, right? But then when we release these little book babies out into the world, it's for others, you know, and if someone has a positive reaction to that book that inspires them to reach out and tell you how much they love the book, I mean, I think it's the responsible thing to do, to respond and have a relationship with that person, because that's what everything is about, is relationship, right?
Yeah. I mean, one time I've often thought, I wish you could. I mean, I know you can respond to reviews on Amazon, but you know, we're always cautioned against that, whether they're good or whether they're good or bad. Mm-hmm. I really do wish I could find out who these people are sometimes who write these beautiful reviews, just to say thank you. Mm-hmm. And one time I took a 5-star review I had gotten on, I don't remember which book. It was one of the Dream Horse Mysteries, and posted it. You know, made like a little graphic and, you know, on my Facebook page, and just said, I'm always so thankful when someone takes the time to write a review. Here's a recent one I got that just really touched me, or whatever. Well, little did I know this person had liked my Facebook author page also, and was a true fan. And she was like, I wrote that. And she was so excited that I like featured her review. And then I was able to thank her, you know, personally for that, because I don't think you can ever show enough appreciation for the people who take the time to comment. Even if it's not a 5-star review, it's still, you know, everybody's very busy. Mm-hmm. Very busy.
Yeah. And, you know, speaking of reviews, I wanted to ask you, do you do anything special to get reviews? And then, you know, we talked a little bit about reviews, but what's your how do you feel about reviews? Like, obviously good reviews are so important, or reviews are so important to authors in general, because it helps a lot of the platforms share a book with people that have read like books, and reviews, you know, Amazon won't often show your book unless it has a certain amount of reviews. So reviews really help books come up in search and other people find them. So we're honored when people leave reviews. But going back to the question, do you do anything special to get reviews? And then what is your feeling how do you feel about, bad reviews? Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to admit, it felt like I'd been stabbed in the heart the first time I got a 1-star review. But at the same time, I was like, well, this kind of almost makes my book feel more legit. I mean, you go out to any big popular book out there and they've got reviews all over the place. You literally can't please everyone. So I've learned to live with that. My characters, my story, whatever, they're not for everyone. And I really truly feel if you've written something that everyone loves, I'm not sure you're doing it right, quite frankly. That's my opinion. But no, I don't do like review swaps or anything that feels it feels awkward to me, because as much as I would love for someone to read my book and write a review in exchange for, I've been burned too many times where then the book I've read, I didn't feel like I could really give it a really good review necessarily. And it makes me cringe. Absolutely. So I just don't ask anyone to do that.
And that how I feel is if I don't care for a book, like I'm not into being a negative person. I'm like a optimist and positive person. So if I don't care for a book, I just don't review it. So, but like you said, the Harry Potter books, Stephen King, the Twilight series, all these massively 50 Shades of Grey got destroyed in the reviews. It's like these wildly successful, popular authors also have to deal with sometimes negative reviews. And that's the thing about being a creative, it's like you put something into the world and you open yourself up to for people to fall in love with it, or for people to, have it not be for them. And you just got to keep going and not let things deter you. And I totally hear you when you said, your first negative review was like a stab in the heart. It does hurt. But then again, you've said to elicit a response from someone one way or the other, whether they loved it or hated it, means that you did write something that people had a reaction to, right? So there's something to be said for that.
Right. I do believe if you evoke a strong emotional response, that's part of doing it right. It might not be a positive response, but I mean, I remember one time when I first joined this critique group, a couple of members got into a huge argument about a point of dialogue in one of my chapters. And I was just like, wow, this is so cool. Like they care. They care passionately about this, I mean, there were other authors, obviously, but it raised strong feelings in these people. And I thought, this is a good sign, a really good sign. So that's where I kind of developed that idea from.
That's great. And so you just mentioned a critique group. Is that something that you would recommend to authors or aspiring authors to get involved with? I've heard sometimes they can be a little brutal and competitive, but what's your take on that sort of thing?
I have heard about critique groups like that, and it just really, like you said earlier, absolutely breaks my heart to hear authors tearing other authors down. Sure, not everybody's at the same level, but everybody has to start somewhere. No one started writing everything perfectly right out of the gate, but if you can find a good one, I mean, I value mine beyond anything almost, and the nights that we meet are sacred and have been for years. And a friend of mine and I actually run the one that I am in. Over the years, we just kind of developed our own group. And we're very careful about who we invite to join. We keep the group small. We don't let people just sort of walk in off the street. And because it is we've developed trust over the years, and all writing is personal. I don't care if it's a cover letter, a query letter, a synopsis, fiction, nonfiction, children's, any kind of writing. It's still personal. It came from inside of you. And so that needs to be treated with respect and kindness no matter what. And even if it's poorly written or just could be better in some ways, it still needs to be handled sensitively. And so we've developed this environment where we feel, and we're very close. You know, we've been together, a lot of us, for a number of years. And even though the only time we come together mostly is when we meet for critique, that has become such a almost intimate experience, because again, you share, again, even if it's fiction, you know, you write about things that come from your heart. And so people get to know parts of you maybe that no one else really does. And anyway, so absolutely love mine, absolutely strongly encourage finding one if you can find a good one. If not, start your own, where the people are involved are, it's not about their egos. You know, they're not there just to get compliments and be told how great they are, or they're writing anyway. It's not about them. It's about the writing. And who are also all, you know, attending conferences or reading books or something to improve themselves and their writing all the time, so that they bring something to the table that will help you get better too. You know, that's really important. So if it's just a social gathering of writers who don't really seriously actually get into the critique part of it, it's not helpful either.
And that's right. And then, so how does it look? So do you all get together like once a month in person, and then communicate through a group or something throughout? Like how did your group work? Like how
so the way
you,
our group works, right now we're meeting every 2 weeks. We were meeting weekly for a long time, but it had gotten hard for everyone to be there every week. And if you don't have enough people there all the time, it gets harder to get good feedback. So right now we meet every 2 weeks. We don't read anything in between. We don't do homework. Everyone's very busy. So we bring our pages to the meeting, you know, within a reasonable limit, 5 to 10 pages, something like that. We bring copies for everyone who will be there. We communicate with each other during the week, so we know who, you know, how many people are going to be there, how many copies to bring. So you pass out your copies, read it, and then we write on the copies that were given, but then we also go around the table, always starting to the right of the reader, so everyone gets a turn to say something, and everyone comments verbally, and then you're done. Wow, and it works really well.
Yeah. And do you meet at someone's house or a restaurant?
No, we meet at we're meeting right now at it's actually a senior center. We belong to an arts council, and we pay a very modest fee to them yearly. And basically they provided this space for us that wasn't being used in the evenings anyway. And so we just go in there for a couple of hours and leave it neat and tidy when we leave. And
that's great to get that sort of feedback. I mean, that it's sort of like having a beta reader, you know, an advanced reader, while you're actually writing the book. So I can only imagine that really strengthens what you're doing, rather than doing
I find it incredibly valuable. Some people don't like to bring anything until they've finished that first draft. I bring it chapter by chapter as I'm writing, when I'm writing a book, and then sort of edit backwards and forwards, sort of, you know, based on some of that feedback, and incorporate it. So by the time I'm done with my first draft, I'm really almost done with the book, because I've been editing it all along. That's just my style, and I write linearly from beginning to end. I don't write future scenes until I've written what leads up to it. I know some people hop around. Whatever works for you is what works. You know what I mean? To me, there's really no right way. I'm more of a pantster than a plotter. The one time I tried really plotting, I completely shot myself in the foot. It was a terrible experience. to the point where one of my critique members finally one night said, "Are you enjoying writing this? Because it doesn't feel like it."
Oh, wow.
And
that's big.
Yes, but that's what you want. You want that honesty. It wasn't an unkind thing to say. She could just tell from the writing that I was like working too hard or something, because I had plotted it out and felt like I had to stick, you know, to that plot. Whereas my style is more kind of like what we were talking about earlier, when you have that out of body experience. I've learned to trust that and just go with that flow and see where it takes me. And I wasn't allowing that to happen, that natural sort of organic way that the story usually gets written for me. And it showed. It showed.
Wow, that,
So,
and I totally agree with that. You have to stick with what like works for you. And so I don't know, I would probably have to come to your group with my full first draft, because I jump all over the place. It's like wherever the character wants me to go is where I just like often I'll write the end in the beginning, and then I'll go like all over inside of it. I don't know why. That's just sort of how it is. And I wanted to ask you another question too. For maybe new authors that may be listening, or aspiring authors, or perhaps just, people that love horse books that are listening, can you explain what a pantser and a plotter is? Because when I first heard those terms, I was like, what the heck is that? Like, can you explain what those are?
Yeah. Well, literally, a pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants. They just sort of, they sit down with that initial idea, or a character talking in their head, and sort of see where it takes them.
Uh-huh.
And I think, and then a plotter, of course, some people plot very deeply, chapter by chapter, spreadsheets, the plot points, and what needs to happen, timing it all out. I say more power to you. Like I said, whatever works. So I think there's a spectrum between pantser and plotter. And I'm not all the way at the far end of the pantser spectrum. I tend to stop and sort of regroup as I'm going along and say, okay, here's what's happened so far. I usually have ideas for scenes in the future. Is that still going to work? Or now, because the characters have taken me in a different direction, that opens up the possibility of something completely different that I hadn't considered. How do I get to that point? I have a general idea of where the story, and I often know exactly how it's going to end, but I don't always know exactly the route I'm going to, because there's more than one way, right?
Right.
Just like looking at a map, we could take the scenic route, we could take the direct route, some combination of the two. So I don't always know what that's going to look like, but they almost always end exactly where I think they're going to.
That is so cool. And thank you for explaining that to us, because,
and just as a word of advice to people starting out, don't be afraid to throw it away. Or find, you just, in the beginning, you have to find out what works for you. And in the beginning, for me, the hardest part was trusting that process. There's so much advice out there, right? And usually people are talking about what has worked for them. When they say, well, you have to plot it out, you have to do this, you'll be more successful, you'll write faster, if you do it this way. Well, maybe, but maybe not, if it's not really what works for you. So don't be afraid to experiment, to go down those crazy dark alleys that your characters are taking you down. You may hit a dead end. To me, though, it's still not wasted. It's writing that is practice that you might use later. You learn something from that. And I also, one of my personal things is the answer is always in the writing. I don't really believe in writer's block. I think there's something else going on in someone else's life that may be impacting their writing, but the writing itself, just sit down. People don't give themselves permission to write crap. I always say, just sit down and start writing, write anything, write your grocery list. It doesn't matter. Let it flow, just let it happen. Don't put those rules on yourself. And something good will come out of that, something that maybe you didn't know going in. So I'm a big believer in that.
That is great advice. And I completely agree. It's just put your buns in the seat and write, and you get better as you go. It's like the more, you do it once and you're like, wow, I can actually do this, and it's like, I think, I'm not sure who said it. It was like Robert Patterson or something. No, that's the vampire from Twilight.
That's the actor.
Oh, I've got a romance on my
there
mind.
is James Patterson.
James Patterson. Yes, excuse me, James Patterson.
Okay.
I think he said, just sit down and write 200 words a day, and by the end of the month you'll have like 1,000 words, and then in a year or 6 months or a year or whatever, you'll have 50,000 words. 50,000 words is a novel. And you just write, allow yourself time to write just a little bit every day, and you get better and you practice, and it's really building a routine, I think, of sitting down and giving yourself the room to write and not being afraid of it. Just being like, Stephen King says the scariest moment is always just before you start. So
Right.
just start, right? I find that's true. Do you
Yes,
feel that way too?
I agree. And I also believe in stretching your creative muscles in different ways if you can. So if you really truly feel blocked, I don't call it blocked, but I'll get to a point in the story where I'm like, just not sure how to get from this here to there. And I'll go for a walk or a ride. A
Mhm,
ride is always
mhm.
good, and I let it sort of percolate in the back. I don't try to force it, and I'll take a couple days break, or I'll, draw a picture or just use, like I said, some other creative muscle. It's not that I can know how to draw or anything, or even I strongly believe in honestly trying to write poetry,
Mm.
because that sort of, it just triggers a different part of your brain. And then that will filter over into your other writing. I don't know how it works exactly. It's one of those mysteries that I don't understand, but it can be very powerful.
And I mean, this is such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, just about writing in general. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how did you choose to publish your books? Did you go the independent route, or are you traditionally published? Would you talk a little bit about that?
I am indie published. I tried going the traditional route because back when I actually first started writing, that really was the only option still. And so I achieved that goal of getting an agent, which sounds really cool, but this particular agent didn't really work that hard for me. I don't think she was really that interested in sort of helping me manage and build a career. It was like she went through the motions. She submitted my manuscripts, but I don't think she was really trying to find the right home for them. I'm honestly not even sure she read them all the way through to really understand where they might fit, if you know what I mean. It's
Oh,
it's hard to
that's
know.
too bad. And you're paying this person.
Well, they only get paid if they sell it.
Ah,
So when they sell it, when the publisher pays you, whether it's your you know, what do you call it when you get paid up
your
front?
advance.
In advance, they get typically 15%. So the way it works actually is the publisher pays the agent.
Mm.
Agent takes their 15%, and then you get paid by the agent.
Oh,
It's
I see.
usually
Okay.
how the funds flow. So I didn't sell any of my manuscripts. We did get a lot of, I was at the time shopping both Raiveer and On the Buckle. Got a lot of very positive rejections. You can think of them that way, really positive feedback on the writing, just, not what we're looking for right now, or, just bought something similar last week, those kinds of
Mm.
things. Best of luck. So then over time, online publishing was beginning to become a thing. And of course, there's always smaller presses, but she wasn't interested in going that route because there's no way she would have made any money, really, or
Mm.
very little money doing that. So we
Mm-hmm.
just parted ways amicably, because I was interested in looking into some other options. In the meantime, I had my daughter, and along with taking care of having all the horses here, the writing sort of just, had to take a back seat for a while to being a mom, which was an incredible experience in and of itself that was completely unexpected for me. Not that having a child was unexpected, but I really didn't know going in that motherhood was going to be a thing that would touch me so deeply.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so I let writing it wasn't just the writing, it was that whole looking for agents, querying, looking for editors, doing all that research. It's very time consuming and tiring. And
Well, it sounded like motherhood also is like sort of like being with the horses. It slowed you down. It got you present. It put you
yeah,
in the now. You took that time to be, with your
yeah,
child,
yeah,
which is important.
yeah.
And those are growth opportunities too. And some things have to take the back burner when you're doing
Well,
that.
and it also, we had some issues. And so by the time I had my daughter, I was a little bit older. So I was pretty sure I was only going to get one shot at this. So,
Mhm.
and I was old enough to appreciate how quickly time flies, and that I didn't want to miss anything.
That's beautiful.
So that's what I focused on. But anyway, by the time I kind of circled back and started revisiting my manuscripts, and the publishing world had changed dramatically, and was beginning to become what it is now, which is a crazy, wide open, Wild West show, basically. I think it's starting to calm down, but wow, it was really wild there for a while. But I decided to go ahead and indie publish, partly because I'm a bit of a control freak and I'm a little impatient. And so, for instance, I was working with another guy for a while who's great. He's a great editor. He thought he wanted to be an agent for a while. He didn't, but he offered to publish Raiveer out of his own small publishing house. And we worked together for a little while, and he had some great feedback on the manuscript, but I felt like the manuscript was ready. I liked it the way it was. I already had a lot of feedback on it and worked on it really hard. And it's not that I'm not willing to take edits at all. That wasn't the case, but I was just ready to put it out there and sort of see what happened. And he was just very slow to respond to emails. I mean, of course, he was very busy too, but you know what it's like when you're on the end where you're waiting for an answer about something. And I just thought, no, I'm not. I'm just going to do this myself. And so I'm not waiting on someone else to do whatever. And it's worked out really well. I've been very happy with it. So, but as you know, it's you have to do all the jobs. You have to wear all the hats. So you have to take off your author hat and put on your formatting hat or your marketing hat or whatever. And all of those other pieces take time away from writing. So you have to be prepared for all of that. And it's not for everyone.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you know, and you have to want to do the work to independently put a good product into the market. So you have to take the time to do your research. You have to take the time to make sure you're editing properly and putting it, you know, it's like, I like to say, you know, it's like the Spider-Man thing with great power comes great responsibility. You know, independent publishing has given us so much power over our own creative endeavors, but it's up to us. It's our responsibility to make sure we're putting the very best product we can into the world, which means working with editors, working with good book designers, getting your specs right, formatting correctly, you know, doing all the things right. And there's a ton of information out there on how to do that, you know, but you are starting a business and you have to think like a business person too. Like I personally like independent publishing because of what you said, the creative control, owning all my intellectual property. I mean, that's very important to me, you know, knowing how my book is going to look in the world when I put it out there. But what I also like too is it's, I feel like learning new things keeps you young, and there are perpetually new things to learn around independent publishing. There's new systems to implement. There's new revenue streams that you can open up. There's, you know, possibility around audiobooks and print books and hardbacks and ebooks. I mean, there's like so much possibility, but you know, you can't be lazy, I guess is what you're saying. You have to like really dive in there and get not just your toe in, you have to put like your whole body in the water.
Put your whole self in.
Right? Would you agree with that?
I would agree completely. And it is hard. But like you said, taking responsibility for all of that, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But you do want your book baby to be as beautiful as it can be and as good as it can be before you put it out there. And I think the ease of publishing has allowed a lot of books to get out that aren't as good as they could have been. If people had just been a little more patient with that part of the process. Yeah.
That's right. And which leads me into one of the other questions I wanted to ask you. Is there any myth that you'd like to debunk around independent publishing? Is there anything that's there for you that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think the myth that, well, I don't know if this really is a myth, but that you don't need an editor or at least a proofreader. You know, or unless you're a graphic artist, that you can do your own cover, you know. There's just too many choices out there, too many shiny objects in a sense for readers that are really beautiful, from the cover to the blurb to the writing itself. To put something out that it basically just won't be able to compete is a little backwards.
And talk just a little bit more about the importance of editing. I think that's one place where independent publishing in the early days kind of got knocked because people were in such a rush and so excited. They were publishing their books without going through the process and creating a team around releasing the very best product. And some books squeezed through that the editing was less than spectacular. So would you talk a little bit more about the importance of a good editor and kind of maybe what your process is like for your books?
Well, it's like the critique group, you know, they're just going to see things that you can't see because you are too close to the work.
Mm-hmm.
We all have, you know, our word babies that we love and we don't want to kill them. But, you know, or we've written this long, beautiful, descriptive passage that is beautiful, but it's not in the right place, or it slows down the narrative at that point, or the action, or whatever. Or, you know, when you read it to yourself, it sounds okay, but the dialogue is really very unrealistic and stilted, and you just can't hear that yourself. You need someone else, not your mother, not your husband, who, or your wife, if you're a guy, unless they happen to be an editor, you know, but even that's a relationship that's fraught with, you know, for them to give you real good feedback is putting them in an awkward position, really, when you think about it. So you need either, like I said, critique partners or beta readers that you really trust, who, because there's all different levels of editing is the thing. There's proofreading for just typos, but that's not editing. Mm-hmm. Editing is really looking at the book as a whole, and whether you know, just for instance, the main character's arc makes sense, or the main character is just consistent how you set them out to be in the beginning. Or that pacing is part of it. You know, sometimes people write things that are interesting and funny, but they just don't fit in the story, or they don't make sense, or whatever. And it makes sense to you. I've often had a situation in critique where start to give someone feedback and they're like, well, it's because blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, just stop. You are not going to be there to explain it to the reader when they're reading it. So if this doesn't make sense to me for whatever reason, or our rule is sort of, if 3 people say the same thing in critique, you need to kind of pay attention to that. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, take it all with a grain of salt with what works within your story. But even getting to that point where you can sort of filter those sorts of comments it takes practice and experience and a level of objectivity, you know, about your work that is hard to achieve. It's really hard. We've had people come to critique who said they were ready and couldn't wait to get feedback and didn't come back, even though we're incredibly kind, especially with beginners. They really weren't ready to actually hear honest feedback on their work that they thought was perfect and beautiful the way it came out of them, you know. So,
and I think that's why
editing is very important.
Yeah. And I think that's also why finding an editor, you know, that works for you, it is good too, because not, you know, it's a different relationship. And, you know, so like kind of the way I work with my books is, my husband, you know, you said don't use your husband, but I use my husband as like my very first reader.
Oh,
so
sure.
like I'll write a chapter, you know, like every week, and then we'll sit down over coffee on the weekend and he'll read it back to me so I can hear it. And then he'll make comments like that didn't make sense, and he'll catch like the early typos and things like that. And then that's kind of like motivation for me to write my chapters. And then when the whole thing is done, I send it to my editor, who I've had a relationship with, you know, ever since in the first book in the series, In the Reins, was written. And so she's my editor, and she's tough, but she's funny, and she's very good at catching inconsistencies, and she makes recommendations. And then, you know, she'll even tell me like, this whole chapter annoyed me, take it out or rewrite it, you know, and like, so she really looks for, you know, all the structural things. She also catches typos. But I think, you know, as I grew and as I got better with my writing, what I also realized is like, you know, there's my husband, then there's my editor. Then, you know, there's like, you can't just go from there and then publish. Like that's what I figured out too. I had it edited several times by the same editor on In the Reins, and still things got through. So with my future books, what I went into was editing, revising through with my editor, then having a copy editor, like to do the final thing to look for, you know, any additional errors or inconsistencies. And then from there, I went to beta readers or advanced readers that I trusted, right, with copies of my books to look for even more typos and different things that they
Right.
catch, you know,
Right.
it's like five people that I trust with advanced reading. And then I felt like I could go to publish. So it's like, there's
Right.
a lot that goes into making sure you have the very best product out there. Like, but it's all a learning experience too. It's like
It
my
is.
first early editions of In the Rain. Sometimes I'm like, I can't believe those are in the world, because everything's been fixed now, but
Right.
sometimes you just got to do it. And
Yeah.
then you get better as you go. Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And there's nothing worse than that feeling when you realize you've published something that has a typo or something.
Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah, I know. But what you just described, not only can it be expensive because editors aren't cheap,
Mm-hmm.
it's time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And although earlier I said I'm impatient about certain types of like communication and stuff, I am not impatient when it comes to publishing my books, because I really, do want them to be as good as they can be. In fact, I made so many mistakes on these books. It's crazy. When I first wrote On the Buckle, which is the first Dream Horse mystery, I really didn't write it intending it to be a series. I thought, oh, what the heck? I'll put book 1 on the cover. Well, that means you have to write book 2. And it early on, it had a BookBub ad, and it just exploded. And all of a sudden, I felt really pressured to write book 2, which is when I decided to plot, and because I thought that would help me write it faster. That was a total mistake. But in the future, with series, I don't intend to ever publish the first book until I have subsequent books written. Not only because then you can time out your publishing and people aren't waiting. Even if you're not doing rapid release per se, you don't want to put one book out in 2013 like I did with Raiveer, and here it is 2019 and I don't have a second horse collar book out still.
Mm.
That's kind of not fair to readers. You make a contract in a way when you promise them that there's more to come and then more never comes.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really right. But also things would come up in subsequent books, but if the first or second book are already out there, you can't go back and fix that or set that up. It's too late. You have to work with what you've already put out there. So I would encourage anyone planning to do a series to write most of it at least before ever publishing the first book, because things are going to come up down the road that need to be incorporated toward the beginning.
And I think that's a really interesting point that you made too about, you put the first book out there and you hadn't really mapped where you were going with the other ones. I mean, and then readers loved it because of the BookBub, which I want to talk to you about in just a second, but that kind of puts some unnecessary pressure on you to create a story. And I find that writing under pressure I don't create my very best work when I'm writing under pressure, which is something I also like about being an independent author. I say when I release, I say what my schedule looks like. I don't have to do anything to pay anything back or make any money and I find that I feel like my work is better because I'm not under pressure to make something happen by a deadline.
Right.
That was really interesting to hear. So BookBubs, I've heard BookBubs are very, very challenging to get. How did
they
you
are
get that?
They are now, but this was quite a number of years ago.
Okay.
And I just submitted it and they took it. I submitted both Raiveer and On the Buckle. They only took On the Buckle.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with the original cover, which I did do myself. Do not recommend. But that was kind of when BookBub was first starting out. I don't know how long they'd been up and running by that time. And it was still very expensive, several $100s, even for a freebie in that category. But the response was amazing. But I actually have a PR company now that helps me. And they've been submitting my Dream Horse mysteries periodically with BookBub, and they haven't gotten picked up again. I'm like, I don't understand. They did them once before. Why wouldn't they do them again? But, the big publishers use them now. And it's just harder to compete. So, but there's a lot of other services like that out there, but I don't know of any that come close to the impact that BookBub can have.
And I was going to say, for listeners, why do you think BookBub has this spectacular impact? Like, why is, BookBub the holy grail of book advertising? Like, why do you think that is?
I don't know, except I don't know how they did it, but they have just developed a huge, like millions of subscribers. So I don't know what they did to do that, but they're just the biggest ones out there as far as the number of readers that they have who subscribe to their daily newsletter of deals. And so they've become very discriminating in what they curate for their readership.
Which is really interesting. I just did an interview with Ann Hunter. She writes the North Oak series, and she actually was one of she just got a book club recently within the summer, and it skyrocketed her to number one on a bunch of different charts. And and she said what's unique about them is they really segment their huge following into very specific lists that they build when you do these advertising campaigns. So basically
they have more categories and much narrower categories than they did when earlier. Yeah.
Well, very cool. Thank you for talking with us a little bit. That was a little off tangent. So, we're getting down to our final questions, and what I sort of have left for you is, would you share a little bit about what is the hardest thing about being an author for you? And then what's the very best thing about your career being an author?
I guess the hardest thing is, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. As an indie published author, it's doing all the parts. Sometimes I would just like to sit and write and not do any of the other parts. And yet at the same time, as you said, you just have to get your butt in the chair. So being disciplined about writing all the time. I have a full-time job. So it's challenging. And I'm not the only author by any means who also has a full-time job and a family and so on. And then you get that reader who reaches out to you and says, I couldn't put it down. A recent review it was for the entire box set of Dream Horse Mysteries, said, and it's on the UK site, I think it said, just make sure all your laundry's done before you pick this book up, because you are not getting anything done until you finish reading it. I was like, oh my gosh, that, total music to your ears, right? I mean,
absolutely.
You couldn't ask for better feedback from a reader than I couldn't put it down. That's what we want. We want that experience for the readers, and I've always said, if I feel like, when I'm writing, sometimes when it's going well and when I love it, is when I feel like I'm writing a book I can't put down. I think about it all the time. I can't wait to get to the computer or any piece of paper, pencil, pen, whatever, and write more of it. That's when I'm in the flow and I know it's going really well. It's not always like that, but it can be. And that's when it's just such joy. It's amazing.
And I do feel like flow for me happens more often when I touch my story every day, because it's always kind of there. I find that it's harder to get back into the rhythm when I've taken a break over extended period of time. So, like that flow experience happens for me when I'm regularly engaging with my book. Yeah, but life doesn't allow that all the time. So
not all the time.
Yep. So you just have to bring yourself back, kind of get back into the rhythm, and then it comes back, and it's miraculous. It is a miraculous feeling when that does happen. So.
And I did want to touch on something that you mentioned when you said that your husband is your first reader and he reads it out loud. And we tell people in critique all the time, and it's why we force everyone to read their work aloud when they come to critique. Read your work aloud to yourself. It is amazing how different it sounds than just reading it in your head. And also print it out and read it periodically, because I see things in print that I don't see on the screen.
That is absolutely right.
So those are just a couple other little pieces I would offer for people first starting out.
Absolutely. Candace, this has been such a wealth of knowledge, and I am so glad that we met each other at the American Horse Publications Conference in person, and I'm so glad we've started on this great author friendship journey together. And Candace and I are going to look at all sorts of great ways to bring our community together even more and partner up and support other, horse book authors. And so we're coming to the end of our time. So I will link to all this information in the show notes, but would you share where people can find you and your books?
Well, I have a website. It's just CandaceCarrabus.com. I have a Facebook author page. I'm on Pinterest and Goodreads. And of course, my books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, iBooks, all those places. Raiveer and one of my novellas are available as audiobooks. We're not in production right now. I kind of started down that road and then some things came up, but I'm working with an audio producer to get the Dream Horse Mysteries made into audiobooks. So hopefully that'll be coming in 2020. Lots of exciting things coming in 2020.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, and I sign up for my newsletter on my website. And I do love hearing from readers. So do never be afraid to reach out. You know, authors are just people too. And we can't live on just chocolate and red wine alone. Although can go a long way like that, but it's really nice to hear from readers occasionally, because I feel like, you know, my story isn't really real until someone else reads it. And so you can write all you want, but if nobody else ever reads it, I feel like it's sort of not real. And then, you know, so it's nice to hear from the readers.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And Candace, thank you so much for the gift of your time. And thank you for being a huge supporter of authors supporting each other, which I think is so important. And it was so great to have you on the show. And we'll do some more talking very soon. And have a great rest of your day, Candace. Thank you so much.
It was so great to be here. I love talking about everything with you. And we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Have a fantastic day. Bye, Candace.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I hope you enjoy these Q&A sessions with wonderful equine authors who love all things horses and riding, just like me. Visit my website, carlykadecreative.com, where you can read the show notes, and make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support. Want a free guide to secrets of horsebook authors? Gallop over to carlykadecreative.com/wisdom to have author advice delivered instantly to your inbox. If you are an author who writes about horses and would like to be spotlighted, please let me know. Visit my contact page at carlykadecreative.com to fill out a request. I'd be happy to have you on the show too. Thank you for tuning in to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. See you next time. I'm your host, Carly Kade. Creative writing makes my spurs jingle.